Andy Staples is here from On 3, hosts a show with our buddy. I don't even know if he's my buddy. I've never met him, Ari Wasserman. I feel like
Ari's everybody's buddy, and
I feel like he's my buddy.
It's so funny because we'll have people that I've known for years who'll come on the show who haven't actually met Ari in person.
Yeah.
And within 30 seconds, it's like they are better friends.
Yeah.
Than this person and I am, and we've known each other for 20 years. So it's very frustrating to work with someone who has that superpower, but it also makes for good shows.
I listen as much as I can. I love it. You guys do a great job. You had Paul Feinbaum on this morning, who said that Florida should lose all of its first 4 tough games. So that's LSU, Miami, Texas A&M, and was it Tennessee?
And Texas, yeah.
Texas, yeah.
Yeah.
It was not a crazy take on its face, but just funny. Just law of averages, they might win one.
Well, and the other thing is high optimism at Florida right now because of DJ Lagway, who you will be talking about, I think, quite a bit over the next few years. But, and I'm a Florida grad.
Yeah.
I was very negative on them going into last season. Proved to be correct by Miami and Texas A&M, and then they turned it around. And so now I'm kind of drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit. And
they didn't do enough in the portal.
I disagree. They kept who they had to keep, and that's what cost the money. And when you meet Dallas Wilson, you will understand why they didn't get more receivers out of the portal.
Kid from Tampa. I understand. I got you.
They paid for him too because he was signed to Oregon at the time.
They got out of the thing. That's also like, it's kind of funny now, the player empowerment era in college, where it's like Oregon's like, whatever, like we'll eventually, they let him out of his letter of intent, and they're probably like doing the calculus of like, you know what, we're probably going to have to get someone else out of.
We're going to do this to somebody else.
Yeah,
so
we're good. It's a little bit like the Miami Xavier Lucas thing, where they're whatever. Xavier Lucas, just so anybody knows, we're going to spend 10 more seconds on college before we get to pros, but like, he just left. He didn't enter the portal. He just left because Wisconsin didn't do it. And it's like, I think that's just going to be the future. It's just like, there's no rules, and at most school, 99% of schools learn to live with it.
And then when the schools figure out eventually that they need to collectively bargain with the athletes, it's going to be exactly like the NFL.
Exactly. And that's the only way it works. Otherwise, you're doing 6 hearings a year to Congress people who do not care about your problems. All right. So the reason I wanted to have you on is I wanted to talk about the pro factories in college right now, because Connor Rogers on the show last week, and we talked about how, and I'm gonna do my spiel again, but I had talked to a GM a couple years ago.
I love that Tate Ratledge was the person who inspired this discussion, because Tate, by the way, phenomenal offensive lineman, phenomenal mullet, best podcaster.
What
in the draft?
Is he podcasting?
If you've never listened, he's had a podcast for 3 years. He's had multiple co-hosts because they keep going to the NFL. But Real Talk is the name of the show. It is the best player-run show going. And I'm talking about Draymond Green. I'm talking about all of them.
I had no idea. We're going to check this out. Maybe we'll have Tate on the show in the next.
Oh, please do. He's awesome.
So that's a great note. Thank you, Andy. But I was talking to Jim a couple years ago, and he was saying there were 2 things about college prospects that have changed in the portal era. Number 1 is there's more of there are literally players who will ask NFL teams now in the draft process, what can you do for me? And the GMs laugh and say, that's not how this works. However, they've been asking that for the past 3 years. Now, I think that's probably an interesting, I wouldn't necessarily ask that, but like, that's where they're programmed. I'm more in favor of
I will tell you,
empowerment.
It's what I would ask a team that I don't feel like I'm a scheme fit for.
Yes. How are you going to use me?
Because I want to turn them off of drafting me, so somebody who I'm a better scheme fit for drafts me.
That, you know what the funny thing is, Florio was on the show a couple weeks ago, and he talked about how he thinks Deion Sanders is trying to control the draft process by saying, I'll only coach my son. That way you keep bad coaches from selecting Shedeur Sanders, because Brian Daboll can't take Shedeur Sanders without a Deion Sanders replacing you rumor coming up. So it becomes 4D chess. So then you only get Mike Tomlin drafting you. You only get, and you only get the Titans of the game drafting you.
Isn't the great Mike Tomlin quote? He's talking to some guy who's like a projected top 5 pick, and he's like, I'm never going to be bad enough to draft you.
Well, that was the Warren Sapp. I don't know if I can tell this story without a bleep. We're going to bleep it. Is that Warren Sapp once said that Bill Belichick came to a workout of his, and he had no capability to draft Warren Sapp. And he walked up to Warren Sapp after the workout, and Bill Belichick said something to the effect of, and we'll bleep this, I want to draft you so hard so bad it makes my hard.
Now we know what the 24-year-old's thinking. What kind of line she's getting.
Whoa. All right. I'm gonna look this up. So point being, so that's the number one thing. Number two thing is that you can't get de-recruited anymore. You can't. There's no expectation of this guy spent 3 years in Saban's system. He was a 5-star. He was told he was trashed the moment he got on campus. Was built back up. There was a system of rules. It's not. There's a standard that was met. All that stuff, right? No longer the case because Saban is gone. A bunch of these deans of the game are gone. Certainly in basketball, they're pretty much all gone. And then some of these guys just portal out at the first sign of adversity, which I don't hate. Like, I think there's a lot of like, oh, this guy bailed because he wanted to play more. That's a sign of low. No, it could be a sign if he loves football and wanted to play.
There's some pretty easy transfer portal red flags and transfer portal. Oh, I get it. Like, if it's playing time, if it's scheme fit, that makes sense. If you are playing and you're progressing naturally and you suddenly leave, that's a red flag. And there are guys like that. There's a guy who will be probably in next year's draft named Barry Alexander, who started his career at Georgia, went to USC. He's now at Oregon. I was actually shocked Oregon took him because Dan Lanning doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who wants to deal with all that. But he also went to, I believe, 5 different high schools. So, like, you know what you're getting there. Yes. You know how that is.
By the way, good news. Warren Sapp wrote about this anecdote I told in his book, which is important for 2 reasons. Number one is we have a primary source, so I can tell the story.
And Bill's not going to sue us.
Bill's not going to sue us. And then number 2 is that I briefly was like, what if this story isn't true and I just thought, like, it was just implanted in my brain and I couldn't find it.
Lawn chair video?
And I'm just like, wait a second, what? This didn't happen? My brain killed this on its own? That's way worse news. All right, so all this to say, and you mentioned Lanning, so maybe we'll talk about that here in a second. I'll ask the same question I ask other people. You're Andy Staples right now. Your son has grown to be a 6'6" super freak on Bruce Feldman's list. And you're sending him.
It's just funny because Bruce and I had a conversation the other day about both of our sons' football careers. So this is are
they trending down or up?
Oh, my son is going into his sophomore year. It looks like he's going to be the starting center and spot duty at nose. So yeah, he's doing all right.
I love that. What high school?
He's at a small school here in lovely Gainesville, Florida. So
okay, all right, beautiful. All right, well we're keeping an eye on him. So let's say he becomes an absolute beast. Okay, he's the center. He's the next Ryan Kelly. Every school wants.
He's trying to convince his O-line coach to let him pull because he thinks he's Jason Kelsey. So we'll just go there.
Hey, Kelsey wasn't a good prospect. That's why he had to go to Cincinnati. He was undersized.
Kelsey was a linebacker. Walk-on linebacker.
Where are you putting your freak of a son? Were you placing him in college in order to get him in the pros right now? Give me the best pro pipelines in the NFL.
See, I'm a different person on that because I have literally told my kids if Stanford offers you a scholarship in anything, you are taking it. And Stanford's about to. I mean, there's a chance Stanford might fire their football coach before the season starts. Yes. So that's where we're at in the Staples house. But no, it's interesting because you said he's an offensive lineman, defensive lineman, like. If he's a D lineman, it would be very hard to say no to Georgia if they want you because Trey Scott has done such a phenomenal job with those players. Yep. One, you get the raw talent like Jalen Carter, who is the perfect ball of clay, and then he gets better. But also, you get Jordan Davis, who that was a guy that they ID'd when Scott was at South Carolina, and Jordan Davis was committed to them at South Carolina, and he was considered a good prospect, but not an elite prospect. They saw all those special traits in him and then got those out of him. And so I think it's hard to say no to because you still have Kirby Smart. You've got Glenn Schumann, their defensive coordinator, who's done a really good job, came up through the Saban tree. So on defense, now on offense at Georgia, it's not as cut and dried. Now, Stacey Searles, their line coach, has a pretty good history of putting guys in the pros. The guy they used to have, Matt Luke, who's at Clemson now, did a good job. But it's not as cut and dried. Since Todd Monken left, that offense has not been as productive. So you almost have to go by position coach or by position group. Like, there's one sure thing on that front in college football right now. It is, do you have a receiver who played for Brian Hartline at Ohio State?
Yeah.
That one is rock solid. That's gold.
Or randomly, the coach-proof one is LSU somehow, which will just continue to. But I understand coaching specific is Hartline. Yes.
Yeah, Hartline is the one. Like, Jeremiah Smith being with Brian Hartline isn't even fair. Like, Jeremiah Smith should have to go play for a crappy receivers coach because he's already a cheat code. But look at Emeka Egbuka. I mean, I would feel very comfortable drafting Emeka Egbuka. That I know he's going to come in and be a professional and play like a pro. And Hartline's an interesting one because, you know, he was a very good college player, but he also was a first-round draft pick who signed a second deal in the NFL. Like, he's lived that life too. And I think one thing he's really good at is training these guys to understand how they've got to work. And you notice, like, there haven't been a lot of busts out of Ohio State. If you draft Garrett Wilson high, you draft Jackson Smith and Jigba high, like, they're good.
Yep. Chris Olave. Yep. I completely agree. There are guys who, and it's funny to me because there are guys who are high 4-stars who don't pan out at Ohio State, but I wonder how much of that is just depth chart. I wonder how much of this literally we just don't have.
Jameson Williams. Yeah. Jameson Williams could not get targets because he was behind Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and Jackson Smith and Jigba. So Jameson Wilson, who is obviously an incredible receiver, had to leave. You know, this year you saw a lot of people threw money at Carnell Tate because they're like, hey, you're behind Jeremiah Smith. You will never be wide receiver 1 when Jeremiah Smith is a human being who lives. So you want to come here and be wide receiver 1 because you certainly have talent for it. And he's like, no, I'm good. Like, and Ohio State's obviously going to pay him a lot of money too, but I would imagine it's not as much as his highest offer was.
Yeah. And
the highest offer would be at a place where he'd be wide receiver 1, but he's like, no, I feel like I'm going to be better set up for the NFL doing this.
It's the proof of concept is there, which is you don't have to be a wide receiver 1 in order to be a top 15 pick. And it goes back to something I think about all the time, which is Matt Castle was drafted having never played substantially in a game at USC. And I remember a line from a college football writer around that time. I don't remember who it was. And he said something I'll never forget, which is Pete Carroll is running such a well-oiled machine that the NFL now believes that a USC practice is more valuable than a college football game. And I kind of feel like with with Ohio State, it's like if you're a wide receiver 3, you're still going to get NFL looks in a way that...
And you're also going to be playing against NFL corners in every practice. And so you have a position coach who's teaching you how you have to work to be in the NFL. You have the level of competition that you're going to see in the NFL on a daily basis. So yeah, that makes perfect sense. But it's harder now. And this gets to the root of what you guys were talking about last week. In the transfer portal era, in the NIL era, it's hard to produce a super team. I think Ohio State, this national title team, was the last super team we're going to see for a while because I don't think it's possible to stockpile talent like that anymore. The market's too efficient now.
That's interesting. So your theory is that, you know, Caleb Downs switching teams kind of once in a lifetime thing with obviously Nick Saban leaving.
Right.
Judkins, who knows if Ole Miss would have had the funds this year to say, okay, we know what the price is. Like,
also with Judkins, it was more like, okay, we think we can average this much a carry with anybody.
Yes. So, and Ole Miss, by the way, no one's doubting their funds. Like, they live at the top of the transfer portal.
Yeah. That was more of a we don't think we need to spend on that position. We would prefer to spend on D-line. So
right. Real quick, my 4D chess theory, and I'm shocked it hasn't happened yet. My 4D chess theory on Brian Hartline: Stephen Ross, biggest Michigan man on the earth. Brian Hartline has talked about his desire to one day go to the NFL, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the business school is named after Steve Ross. What could destabilize Ohio State more than Steve Ross saying, Brian Hartline, how would you like to be co-offensive coordinator and receivers coach of the Miami Dolphins? How have we not gotten to a point where owners who, like, Shad Khan is a huge Illinois guy. Like,
Yep.
how have we not gotten to a point where it's like, hey, I got this little $7 billion like playpen. I'm going to use that to also help out my college team. We need to normalize that. Normalize
the Shad Khan
psychological
thing,
warfare.
I think Brett Bielema has looked at the Shad Khan Trent Baalke relationship, and probably if Shad Khan has offered any advice, Brett's been like, I'm good. But the Stephen Ross theory is great.
Yeah,
I do like
yeah.
that. That is absolute 4D chess.
I'm trying to think of who else is out there that's like a huge obviously Jerry with Arkansas, but that's, like, didn't Jerry offer like a blank check to have Arkansas and Arkansas and Texas play every year, and they wouldn't do it for a long time? Obviously they're doing
Yeah,
it now.
and the thing is, well, Jerry probably wanted him playing at his stadium.
Yes, 100%. Yes.
That's going to benefit
They did
Jerry.
end up happening. Yeah.
But the problem with Arkansas is, who do you destabilize? Like,
Right.
They hate Texas more than anything, but they've also got to deal with Oklahoma just across the border from them, even though they've rarely played. They will play more now that they're in the same league. But I don't know who you destabilize if you're Jerry. You've got a lot of work to do. It's not like the Tyson Chicken guy, who's also a big Arkansas booster. Let's go get Coach Cal. Let's write a check and we're done here.
I thought about this 2 years ago. I would never, one purpose of saying I take my job incredibly seriously. And when I'm a journalist on NFL or college, I am just straight down the middle. And there are times when no one hates Miami more than me. But I was thinking about, there you go, Andy. Like, you played at Florida, and like, you have as you said, you were low on them last year. Like, we all have our things.
I was very negative about Florida for a long time. A lot through the Dan Mullen era, for a lot of the reasons that Dan Mullen ended up getting fired over. This is the first time I've been pretty positive about him in a while. So Miami, I'm very positive about in general, because I like when I like coaches who produce good offensive linemen, and Mario Cristobal always has good offensive lines. So
I agree with that. As Daniel Jeremiah once said on this show, it is hard to be a bad team with a great offensive line. So what I was going to say was that I was joking with a buddy 2 years ago when Florida State was playing in the Cheez-Its Bowl. And if you remember, the whole thing was that a bunch of those guys were going to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody was like, how could you like use your ESPN influence or whatever, my sports media influence to destabilize them? And I was joking, and I was like, you know what I can do? I can call Orlovsky and just and I would never do this, but I was laughing with my buddy. I was like, I call Orlovsky and just have him with all the guys, Jared Verse, all these guys who are going to come back. Just tell them, man, you would be the number 1 overall pick. Just have Orlovsky be like, why would you ever come back? You're going to be I'd be hearing from scouts everywhere. And then all of a sudden, 4D chess, they all go pro. And what ended up happening was, I didn't do that because I never would. I'm just joking. But number 2 is Florida State paid them for that year a lot of money commensurate with their pick, which is what you end up having to do now. And it is, we saw that with Penn State with Fashanu, is like, there are ways collectives can get guys to stay. So even if you're going to be a top 15 pick, it no longer matters.
Yeah, it's hard with the top 15. It's still hard to beat that money. But I'll give you an example. This year, I tweeted when this guy said he was coming back. Caleb Banks at Florida, defensive tackle, had a really good end of the season last year, and had kind of played his way. My friend Dane Brugler at The Athletic at the time said he thought he played his way in kind of a second round range. And I said, this is bigger than anything they could have gotten out of the portal.
Yeah.
That they paid him to come back. Like that. And that's, I think college football fans need to look at the transfer portal. You have to look at what your team is losing, look at what your team can bring back. And it is possible. And then Ohio State did this really well on defense last year. Ohio State had, I would say, 5 defensive starters last year who would have been NFL starters last year. Now, they weren't going to be first-round draft picks. JT Tuimalau, Jack Sawyer, Lathan Ransom, older guys who came back. They would have been starting for their NFL teams, regardless of where they would have been drafted. The fact that they had them all together playing, and this is why I don't know that you can ever do this again in college football because it's so expensive. It's going to be so expensive to do it. But these guys all signed before the NIL era started. So they come from a different age, and they wanted to play together one more time. And Ohio State made it worth their while. That's key. That's key. I mean, if you can get a third-round draft pick to come back, a third-round draft pick is such a good college football player.
I completely agree. And Orlovsky no longer does college bowl games, so I can't destabilize anybody. even my idea, my kernel of an idea, he can no longer.
That's the problem. He's gotten too big on the debate shows, and
no longer.
He doesn't have time.
And also, Florida State, they did it to themselves.
They did it to themselves. Now you don't have to worry about it. Now how do you destabilize the Notre Dame offensive line before they play against the U in the season opener? That's the question.
I think that's going to be a dogfight. I'm really excited about that game. Really excited.
I can't wait. I can't. And Notre Dame might have a homegrown quarterback, so
they might. And I'll tell you, the one thing that I'm less. So last year, Florida Miami. Who was it? Was it? I think it was Scott Van Pelt called it the Pitchforks Bowl. Because
that was me.
That was you. Okay, I thought it was you. I thought it was you.
The Torches and Pitchforks Bowl, because it did not matter who lost. Yes. The losing fan base was going off the cliff.
I was going to say it was either you or SVP, because SVP had a similar take, but I didn't know who called it the Pitchfork Bowl. But like that, there was so much on the line there because it was like the one of the teams could have been a 10-win team. One of them could have been a 6-win teams, 5-win team, and you were just seeing it in real time. With Notre Dame and Miami, I actually think both of them will be pretty good. So it's not the same razors, and also with the
well, here's what people need to understand. Here's what people need to understand about Notre Dame. They played in the national title game last year, and 2 starting offensive linemen hit the transfer portal and are playing somewhere else next year because they weren't going to have starting jobs this year.
Yep,
that's how good Notre Dame's offensive line is going to be this year.
Yep. And they hit the portal immediately, and everybody was like, "Oh well." Like that's depth. That's depth to me. All right, let's talk about draft crushes you've had this year, where you're like, okay, these teams are going to get a steal if they take these guys. Hit me with a couple.
This is a guy I think is going to go in the first round, but it's one of those. I call it my Tyler Lockett theory. When you play on a team where you are the only legitimate offensive threat as a receiver, and every defense you play knows that, and you still put up huge numbers, you're going to be great no matter what. Tetraroy McMillan from Arizona. 84 catches, 1,319 yards. That's a 15.7 yard average. They were a bad team. He was it. He was the production on offense, and every defense knew it, and they still couldn't do a damn thing about it. I love that. Jaden Higgins from Iowa State's another receiver I love. And I will say this about a guy from your school. I do not give a crap what Xavier Restrepo ran in the 40. Don't care. Watch the tape.
So I was thinking about this yesterday. So just so you guys know, Xavier Restrepo, who's I believe the leading receiver in Miami history, ran a 4.8 yesterday. To me, that makes his accomplishments almost more impressive. He's got no measurables whatsoever. Now, it's possible the 4.8 is influenced by him trying to put on weight. He did, by the way. Almost everybody opted into the bowl game. He did not. He's been training since the Syracuse game on November 30th.
He shouldn't have run. He didn't run at the combine, and I assumed that was why. He should have just came up with an excuse to not run at pro day.
Drew Rosenhaus is smarter than that. How do you not say he's totally going to get the letter? I love down the letter to all 32 teams. Like so-and-so has been in a letter to all 32 teams. This random doctor said this guy is the healthiest human being he's ever seen. I completely agree with you. I think that a team should take a flyer on him day 3. He can get open. His ball skills are really good. And unfortunately, he would be one of the biggest outliers in NFL history as far as being a 4.8 receiver. But I also think, and I think there's a lot of really lazy, he could be like a Julian Edelman. Julian Edelman ran a 4.5, one of the fastest 3 cones in history. The measurables were there for Julian.
Well, and Hunter Renfrow is my example for this always, because everybody thinks Hunter Renfrow is some tryhard. Like I had Clemson DBs who played against Hunter Renfrow when he was a 140-pound walk-on. Or like
Yeah.
he was cooking future NFL guys in
Wes
his
Welker.
first practice because he has elite change of direction. It's not because he worked really hard. Like God-given elite change of direction, and he worked really hard and became a good receiver. But Restrepo gets open. His ball skills are incredible. His route running is incredibly precise. Like, I don't care. The job is to to get open and catch the ball. And that's what like, he's not coming up from the FCS where, okay, you're not sure about the level of competition he faced. You saw him against NFL caliber DBs, and he's fine.
He tore the young man's ACL against Florida. He did the slowest spin move of all time. Yeah. And the starting safety for Florida tore his ACL because he was so incredibly confused by the spin move. I completely agree with you. I think that if he ran well, I think you're talking, and maybe NFL teams knew this, but I thought if he ran well and had the 4.6, 4.5 speed, you're talking end of the third round. I would have thought that maybe top 100 if he had all the measurables. Now that's not in play, but I still would take a draft pick on him, get him in camp, and who knows? Like, I just think he's got a little bit, like he's like a slot version of Travis Kelce, where it's like, I don't know what's happening, but he's always open. I don't know what's happening. Like, he just sits down in these zones and he falls down.
That offense. So Shannon Dawson, their OC, is an air raid guy. The air raid is like the purest form of the Mike Leach, Hal Mummy air raid is predicated on quarterbacks and receivers just repping it over and over until they have essentially a telepathic connection where the receiver in real time is adjusting his route based on what the defense is doing. It's go find open grass and the quarterback will find you. Like that. That's kind of what Kelce does with Mahomes, who's an air raid quarterback, by the way.
That's 100% correct. All right. I want to talk about this year's Cam Ward. And what I mean by that is there's going to be no Cam Ward who's going to be first overall this time next year. There's a bunch of homegrown guys who might be in that conversation. Or maybe not.
So?
We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. All right. Tell me the portal guy who this time next year we're talking about as a top prospect because he found a home.
It's the guy who replaced Cam Ward at Washington State. It's John Mateer. John Mateer is going to be Oklahoma's starting quarterback this year. They are pumped. They're thrilled. This guy was amazing at Washington State last year with not a lot. Because remember, Washington State and Oregon State got decimated by conference realignment. They were left homeless, essentially. And so everybody had left Washington State, but Mateer was still there. Mateer's from Little Elm, Texas. He actually played in unlike Cam Ward, who played like a wing T offense in high school. Mateer played in an offense where he threw a bunch. It was a 6A school that wasn't good. Like, they weren't good at football. And they had a really hot start his senior year. I think they won 5, and I think they started 5-0. But then they lost a bunch of games at the tail end because they hit the meat of their schedule. But the losses were all like 65-48. Like, this guy was balling out. But because of the politics of quarterback recruiting, guys who blossom that late tend to have a hard time finding a home. Now, Eric Morris, he's now the head coach at North Texas, but he was the OC at Washington State. He was the head coach at Incarnate Word, who got Cam Ward to Incarnate Word and took him to Washington State. Eric Morris found Mateer, and brought him to Washington State. Mateer, he plays a lot more in structure than Cam Ward. Cam Ward's improv skills are incredible. There's a lot more direct running, like quarterback called runs with Mateer, because he's just a very tough runner, and he's very fast. But his arm strength is incredible. His vision is incredible. He's going to be playing with better players at Oklahoma this year. Now, look, I don't know how good they're going to be at Oklahoma because their offensive line needed a lot of improvement from last year. We'll see if they're better. Their receiving core was decimated by injury last year. Then they had some guys they lost to the portal. The hope is that Deion Burks comes back healthy. They got a guy named Giovanni Gibson from Arkansas Pine Bluff, who may be the find of the transfer portal. So, which is saying something considering the quarterback is probably, I think Mateer will be the highest impact transfer in college football this year. And so I would not be shocked if he revolutionizes Oklahoma, and they need some help. Like, he turns Oklahoma good against a really tough SEC schedule. We're going to be talking about Mateer in the same way we're talking about Cam Ward. The other one who's draft eligible, who is with his original school, is Lenora Sellers of South Carolina.
Yes.
And he is awesome. He's so much fun to watch. It's funny because I assumed that going into the 2026 draft cycle, we'd be talking a ton about Nico Iamaleava from Tennessee, which we still probably will be talking about him in the draft. I just don't know if he's going to be what he was projected to be, because he was the first big NIL guy. But Lenora Sellers is one that, and that guy has a massive arm. He's very fast. He made South Carolina so much better. Yep. And I think there's a good chance that we could see him blossom even more this year. I don't think he's got anywhere near his ceiling yet.
Darian Mensah, Tulane to Duke. If you look, so first of all, 6'3", 200, can move. Mm-hmm. He didn't have, the reason I think he's underrated nationally is he didn't do, and he probably could have, he didn't do the whole tour. He didn't do, hey, I'm looking at the XYZ SEC school. I'm looking at XYZ Big Ten school. Duke bought him out. Like, Duke gave him a ton of money and said, this conversation is over on the front end. Well, and he went there.
It was very strange. Like, we were, until we found out that Mensah was headed to Duke, it didn't make sense what was going on.
Right.
Because Malik Murphy drops into the transfer portal. He started at Duke last year. Duke won 9 games. Malik Murphy threw for like 32 touchdowns or something at Duke last year. But if you looked at the numbers, you're like, okay, he wasn't super efficient. So he drops in the transfer portal immediately. And it's like, wait, is he trying to get a bag? Or did they tell him? Mm-hmm. And I had somebody tell me that they thought Duke had told him, we got somebody coming. I just thought it was somebody else. I thought it might be Tyler Van Dyke, who had played for Manny Diaz at Miami.
Yeah. I don't know if you tell anybody to leave for Tyler Van Dyke. No
right. And he'd gotten hurt at Wisconsin last year. Yeah. But then you find out it's Mensah, and you're like, okay, that makes perfect sense, because Darian Mensah was another one of the darlings of the transfer portal.
Yeah. If you look, I think a website called CFB Numbers, I don't know if you saw it, did this thing last week where they basically had like a spider chart of how good each guy is. And if you fill up the circle, I'm describing this the wrong way, but if you fill up the circle, you're really good. If you don't fill up the circle, you're really bad. DJU at Florida State, not a lot of
not a great spider chart.
Filling up not the spider chart. But Mensah was like with the top guys nationally. And I kind of think the way Duke overperformed last year, I don't think they're going to win the ACC or anything like that, but I kind of think when we're talking about NFL prospects, I think Mensah is going to be in that conversation this time next year. And also, I know it's kind of a bit of a joke. You mentioned replacing Cam Ward, and you were talking about John Mateer, but watch Carson Beck behind an elite offensive line. Unfortunately, the receivers are not where they need to be.
Hey, Kevin, I've actually seen Carson Beck behind an elite offensive line because he played at Georgia.
I agree with you.
You know what happened, right?
He threw a bunch of interceptions.
When you throw to Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey, things tend to go very well for you.
When you throw to Colby Young, who's not fighting for the ball in the end zone, and ends up being an interception against Alabama.
There you go.
But only so you have a couple of guys. The point I was going to get to was that the receivers are not last year's receivers in Miami.
But they like the young guys. I think they're actually pretty excited about them.
I agree. JoJo Trader, Elijah Lofton. We're
CJ Daniels coming in from LSU, late of Liberty. Yeah.
Yes. Nia Carr. Like, there's a lot of young kids who Mario brought in the last couple of years that they're going to have to pop. But it's not. There's no Restrepo. There's no Sam Brown. There's no Isaiah Horton, who went to Alabama. And that was reported as soon as he was in the portal, which I thought only Miami did, by the way. I thought Miami invented tampering.
Duke does, as we just said, Duke
does.
So.
I thought before Xavier Lucas, nobody had ever tampered. I didn't understand that. I thought Xavier Lucas was the first player to ever be tampered with. I don't know. Andy Staples, thank you so much, buddy.
Oh, that was a pleasure. Anytime, Kevin. Thank you.